I wanted to take a little moment here to talk about a social skills tip. We're trying to give you guys some short and to the point tips because we know you got a lot of things you got to get to in your day. And one of the many things that we talk about with social skills, sort of the beginning of it all, the first step, and the step that we're working on throughout our lives is eye contact. How do we get eye contact? How do we reinforce eye contact? All day long today, we've been talking about how to truly reinforce the behaviors that we want to see continue. We know that the first principle of ABA is that in order for any behavior to be maintained, it has to be reinforcing. So how do we begin to make eye contact, reinforcing, and then how do we continue to make it reinforcing? One of the things that we need to talk about whenever we're talking about eye contact is that we want real and natural eye contact. We don't want a staring contest, right? I've seen people who were so proud of themselves that they taught eye contact, and what you see is the child who stares at you and is not seeing you, is staring through you. That's not the kind of thing that we want. When we're having a conversation, even just now, I looked down, I'm talking to you, but I looked away because we think, and we're not having this incredible, intense eye contact go on and on and on. And even people who do make that incredible, intense eye contact that just goes right through you, it's not. They're not, what am I trying to say? They're actually looking at you and having thoughts and thinking instead of just staring at you. We never want to be creating a circumstance where we're reinforcing staring. That's not what this is about. It's about eye contact, real and natural and organic eye contact. So how do we get that from our children? We know that for a typically developing child that they're going to find that reinforcing in and of its own. I can remember when I was pregnant with my child that we had to go to this parent training for my insurance at that time. Big, huge room full of people, all these expectant parents, just pregnant women everywhere. And they showed us a video that was hosted by Rob Reiner. And it was about how important it is to make eye contact with your babies because they love it and it helps their brains to develop, and how it's this wonderful and joyous thing. And eye contact is just fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. And how your child will find it reinforcing. You know, and I sort of feel like it's that Dr. Seuss book about, the places you'll go. And in that book, it says, the places you'll go and you'll hit the high heights and you'll see the best places, except when you won't, because sometimes you don't. And the truth of the matter is that sometimes our kids don't find eye contact reinforcing in and of itself. And there are lots of different theories about that, and I think it's different for different children, but the truth of the matter is that in order to get them to make the eye contact, we have to make it reinforcing to them. So, how do we do that? Again, going back to our discussion earlier this morning, you got to know what your child finds reinforcing. And that might be trial and error to figure it out, because if you find the thing that's really reinforcing, then you're going to see the eye contact shoot up if you're giving the reinforcement when the eye contact happens. I've shared that with my son that he really didn't play with anyone. The only exception that he was willing to engage with someone to play was if you were playing pirates and having sword fight. He was a huge, huge fan of Peter Pan. It was his favorite thing to do was watch Peter Pan. The A&E version, by the way, of the staged version, and loved and still loves that. He got to see it live last fall, and he's going to get to see it again this summer. Big, huge event for us. And but as a child, he just loved that. I'm going to well up because it meant so much to him. But so that was the thing that he would do, is that he would play pirates, and he loved to play swords. And our therapists coming in the beginning saw that and said, let's take that and make it part of the eye contact lesson, because my son did not have any receptive language at that point. So even saying to him, look at me, would have meant nothing to him, right? And he just wasn't capable of making the eye contact in the way that we wanted to see that grow and develop. develop. So we've got to make it reinforcing, right? So the therapist would come in, and we had plastic play swords, but people were getting hurt. So, we had to take it a notch back. So they would come and they would actually rip out of construction paper a play sword so that it didn't have a sharp edge. Nobody could get a paper cut, right? So no scissors, but we would rip these swords out, and we'd have to do it every day because they would get torn up. But they would have their little swords in hand, and he would get one, the therapist would get one, and they would start, and all you had to do was hold the sword up, and boy, my son would come running because it was so reinforcing to him. So he would come running, and they would start the sword fight, and he would be so excited that he's playing with them. And what the therapist would do is that they would pause, and they would look at him and make eye contact with him. And he, in the beginning, it was so interesting to watch his behavior because he was so excited, and it would stop suddenly, and you could see him trying to figure out, what's the go button? What's the button that I push to make this ride start again? And eventually, he would be like looking everywhere, doing everything, and sometimes push against them, and but they would do absolutely nothing except make eye contact. They'd be totally frozen and making eye contact with him. And eventually, even for a split second, his eyes would glance up at theirs, and they would immediately start again. There would be no discussion about it, but it would be the go button for the toy to start again, and the toy was the therapist fighting with him. Now, that's probably not going to be your child, right? Because all of our kids are different. But stop and consider, is there anything that you do play with your child that your child enjoys, that they smile, that they're laughing even potentially? What is there that your child already finds exciting? Now, some kids find tickling really exciting. And we not only did the sword fighting, but we did this with tickles, that Dad and I did this with the tickles, is that we would start to tickle my son, and he would be laughing, and then we would pause, pull our hands up from him just a bare inch so that he would know tickles are coming again. Not that the tickling is all the way done, but there's a sense of anticipation, and we would look at him and we would wait. And he would, and he would even grab my hand and try to put my hand back on his belly to tickle him. And I wouldn't do anything until he at least, and it may not even be like a total glance, but it might be that his eyes just swept and caught mine for a millisecond in the beginning. And as soon as his eyes would come, and flash by mine, the tickling would start again. And it really didn't take long before he began to realize, okay, it's something with the eyes. If I look at their eyes, good stuff happens. So that's for a child who's completely nonverbal, right? There's no functional communication skills yet. That pausing in the middle of something that's reinforcing and not starting again until they make eye contact. And they're desperate to have, that's the key to this whole thing, is that they've got to be desperate to have whatever it is start again. That's when you know that you have the right reinforcer. And that is going to take you probably longer than getting the eye contact, is figuring out what the reinforcement is. Take the time. Have it be your science experiment at home of, okay, well, this isn't doing it, so it must not be the right thing. I got to find something else that's more reinforcing. But you will find it. There is something reinforcing enough for all of our kids. And that's, whatever it is that's the most reinforcing right now, that's the thing. You got to pull out all the stops, because once a child gets attuned to this way of learning, that, okay, when I do the thing that they want, I get the reinforcement, it's going to get easier down the road. It's really the hardest in the beginning. So figure it out, figure out what is super duper reinforcing to them, and then you'll be able to pause, get that eye contact. But the minute you get anything eye contact, you're going to tickle. Now, for kids who are older, one of the key points to working on eye contact, and you can, at that point, if they have receptive language, you can say to them, look at me, or give me your eyes, whatever your phrase is, and you can change it up, because it's not going to stay, or you can keep it the same, because it's not going to stay forever. Eventually, you're going to fade that prompt, right? But what's so essential is that when the child is making eye contact, you have something happening so that we're not rewarding staring, right? So important, and I think we forget that sometimes. But if it's an older child, let's say that it's somebody who's 13, you're still working for reinforcement. Sometimes it can be praise, or it can be a token that if they get 45 of them. They get an hour's worth of video games, for instance. But always, whatever it is, pair it with praise, especially when it's an older child, because at a certain point you want to be able to fade the token system, right? And have it just be the praise. But, if you've said to the child, look at me, and the child does, you want words to be happening so that it doesn't become this moment where the two of you are staring at each other and that you're reinforcing that. Okay, same thing with when we want a child to look at us when we're saying their name, because that's a really important thing too. So we might start in the beginning and say the child's name and say Betsy, and she's not looking at us. So we might say, look at me, right? For the child that's receptive, and for the child that doesn't have receptive language, we may actually very gently turn their head while we're saying, look at me, so that they begin to understand what look at me means. Then we will fade the turning the head and only be saying, look at me. And eventually we will fade that. So we're just saying Betsy and the child looks at us. But all along the way, it has to be reinforcing. That's the key to all of it.